Welcome to Nostalgia Alley. We have an amazing show because we have the
That's me.
amazing Kreskin. For the past 6 decades, he has appeared on TV with Johnny Carson, Regis Philbin, David Letterman, Jimmy Fallon, and his own TV series in the 1970s, The Amazing World of Kreskin. I bet it's an amazing world. And he's also had board games, Milton Bradley, ESP games, and the famous Tom Hanks did the great Buck Howard show movie based on our guest. And he has appeared he makes over 300 appearances annually around the world. You must have a lot of miles there. How many miles have you traveled?
Well, the airline industry, it's no longer 2 years, it's almost 3 years ago, but they announced at that point that I had flown in my career a little over 3.5 million miles.
Wow.
I was on one of the United flights recently, and I used to always sit with the pilots, but you can't anymore because of security. And before they took off, the stewardess came over and said, we want to go say hello to the pilots because they know you. So there were 2 men there, and they said, Kreskin, the 2 of us combined haven't flown the amount of miles that you have flown in your career. So I have crazy stories being in the airline industry has changed today. By the way, thank God I'm not that tall because, as you know, in order for them to accommodate another seat, they've made the toilets now smaller. I have a couple of friends who can't fit into the bathroom in airline pilots anymore. Huh. And then because they've added more seats, so you have knee room that's rather constricted. But that's okay. You just have to lose weight to fly these days.
I went on a budget airline years ago. I had to get the stewardess coffee and cake. But let's go back. The show is called Nostalgia Alley, and I want to go.
And by the way, and I say this to the viewers very sincerely, I can't wait someday to sit back and talk to this gentleman because I love nostalgia. I'm a student. I read history just to live in the past, but you learn from the past. But the romance of the history of show business and the arts is so fascinating. And young people who are one of the grave, serious illnesses in our education today is we no longer teach history. We don't teach it in high school. We don't teach it in college. We teach quote history, but put it in double quotes. I won't go into why. But we learn from history. And if we don't pay attention to it, as we were warned when I was a kid by some famous person, if we don't learn from history, we're going to live it over again. And we are going to live history over again. I will bet $50,000 on it. That's how sincere I am. But I'm fascinated that you are such a student of the great artists of the past. Who were some of the people?
I wish we could go back, right, compared to what we have now. The kids don't know. I was talking to a youngster, and I was mentioning Abbott and Costello. He didn't know who Abbott and Costello. He said, "Who's Abbott and Costello?" Yeah. It's kind of sad that the youth doesn't know the great performers of the past.
And they were very. But we learn. At least we hear some of the songs of the past, which we don't hear so much anymore. But I find the romance of entertainers through the past. I'm going to say this to you because since you talk about my being in the industry so many years, I did celebrate a few weeks ago my 85th birthday. Wow. And I'm booked pretty much now until the end of this year. So I intend to continue my whole life. But at the same time, Bob Hope said to me about 2 years ago. He said, or before he died, he said, "Kreskin, that's the best advice I've ever heard given to people in show business. And you young people who are watching in with your family, listen to what I'm about to say, because when I appear I've done over 1,000 universities in this country and Canada, and sometimes they ask for a seminar or a meet and greet earlier in the day where people who want to get into broadcasting or performance will interview me. It's usually about 40, 50. A couple of years ago at one of the universities, we had about 50 people, and there's a gal with a long sheet in front of her, and I said, unfortunately, you folks will not get to most of the questions, because when you bring up something, I have stories to tell as a background because of my career. But I said to the gal, how many questions do you have there? and she was going to be a newspaper account. I think she had 22 questions. I said, "Or I'm going to give you a story." And she wrote me a letter after that and said, "Mr. Kreskin, that's one of the neatest. I would never have that opportunity." I said, "Don't ask me your questions. I'll answer every question you have on that sheet." And I announced each question and gave her an answer, and it gave her a whole story.
Wow. You're talking about Bob Hope. Johnny Carson says something very important to you, didn't he?
But Hope said, well, people ask me in the business because they want to learn about performing in public and live shows and television shows. And I'll say to all of them, those of you who have talent, whether you want to get into music or arts or comedy or acting or what have you, let me give you some very strong advice, and I mean this in the depth of my heart. You want to get into show business, if you have talent, if you have a great deal of talent, if you'll work your ass off, and don't ever think of minimum wages, because if you're going to think that way, get out of the business. You're not worth it. We don't want you, because in this business you may have to do things for free to prove yourself. And if you take advantage of every opportunity you have, pay attention to the criticism, but also believe enough in yourself. And if all these things go together, and you have a great deal of luck, then you have a minuscule chance of ever making it in show business. And as Hope and people I meet, and some who are old-timers say, Kreskin, all of us who love this business know it. Did it detract from what we did? No. We want to rise above it and fight our job and so forth, because a true showman has that spirit in spite of the fact they see it in movies, the odds are against them. The person who feels that they're going to just get along and something's going to happen, it doesn't work that way.
Look at Bob Hope, over 100, because he loved what he did. And if you love what you do, it's not like working. It's joy.
You see, today, we have to be very careful. Comedians are very unhappy. Right now, the climate is such that everyone tells me this, comedians are not happy in their work because they're afraid of what they joke about. You can't joke about someone if they're overweight. You can't joke about someone if they're white. You can't joke about someone if they're black. You can't, all kinds of crazy things because of organized, there's organized systems to counteract this and so forth. And they've become so frightened of this that Seinfeld and now 7 other comedians have announced they will never perform in a university again as long as they live. That's a very strong remark.
That is very strong.
I hope they change their
very strong.
But the reason they have, and I know from Seinfeld talking about it, but others have said it, is because now if you appear in the university, you have to, in many of the biggest ones, give a script of what you're going to joke about. And if you're going to ad-lib, you have to talk about the topics you're going to ad-lib so they can censor them. Now, in the Second World War, when I was a little kid, watching in Caldwell, New Jersey, the news when I went to see a movie, and then I saw a full-length motion picture, and I saw the news because we had no television and so forth. I can remember pictures of Franklin Delano Roosevelt sitting like this because Bob Hope's next to him mocking something, and because part of one of the most important weapons we have in war is humor. It's a very powerful weapon. And when we lose that, it is the sign that we're going to lose much, much more. And if this continues, we are going to lose much. I've made some dramatic predictions, and I'm planning to write something in the next months to come that's going to be sealed, because I don't know if I want to depress the public at this point.
Wow. Now, Johnny Carson gave you some very clever advice.
Well, the interesting thing about Carson is, because I did 88 shows with him, and he never forgave CBS. Students of television are fascinated. The industry didn't value the early days of broadcasting, and Carson never forgave NBC that they erased the first 2 years of all his shows. They're all gone. And he had major appearances, and not just mine, but others and so forth. So those shows are gone. But at the same time, other shows as well, those are lost because people weren't paying attention. They just videoed something over it. So at the same time, but he had an interesting rule. He had a rule which was pretty well known, and that is that he did not see anybody in his, this was known in the industry, not by the public, he did not see anyone in his dressing room before a show, any guest. He never saw a guest. And he had a reason why. Because, as he discussed with me, some of the best ad libs come when you meet someone for the first time and they'll say where they were. And you can say, oh my God, we got to mention on the air. A second time of the same thing does not have the spark of that first remark.
It's true.
And I have told this to more and more people in the industry.
It's true.
I will learn from that. I will learn from that because I understand what you're saying. So Carson, but I can tell you a little bit while from now why I had to see Johnny Carson before one of the shows I did. And I called NBC because I was traveling, and they said, what are you going to do on the show? I said this. And then I got a call back from NBC, and they said, Mr. Kreskin, you're on next Monday or so forth. I said, yes. They said, you're not to do what you plan to do. We order you not to. I said, okay, no arguing. So because you didn't argue with NBC or the Pope of Rome. So anyway, about 5, I'm in another city. It's about Tuesday, the week before, and I get a call from Carson's secretary, and she knew me and got to know me. She says, you're going to get a call from Johnny. I just want to warn you ahead of time. He needs to talk to you. Can he talk to you tomorrow? And I said, yeah. And what time are you? I'm finished at this college show. I'll be in my hotel room at 10 o'clock. I expect a call from him. So I get a call from Johnny, and Johnny said, Kreskin, you got a message from someone at NBC, though someone just told you not to see me before the show. I said, yes. Then he had some other words for describing the heads of NBC, but their technical words are only in dictionaries with 4-letter words. He says, you understand you will see me before the show. I got to the show. I'm in my dressing room. His secretary comes, I'm going to take you there. She's shaking and walking me, shaking and walking me. We finally get to the dressing room, and he sees me, and we're going to have to go to a break at this moment. Do we?
We got about a minute and a half.
And I said, Johnny, listen to me, I have to talk to you. He said, I understand. Close your eyes, listen to my voice. This is going to happen to you. This is going to take place when I count to 5, your eyes will open. He opened his eyes. He says, okay, I trust you. And then it comes to the show, and Johnny, I'm the last guest on, and he says, we have a special guest, Kreskin. Kreskin, I understand you want to do something with me. And he said, yes. I said, would you walk over here and stand with me, Johnny? He stands there. I said, Ed McMahon, get 2 chairs. And Doc Severinsen, get 2 chairs. They will. They don't know what's going to go on. Tell me when we have to put people on hold to give them a cliffhanger. I said, Johnny, listen to me. As I count to 5, his eyes started to close. I said, your body is becoming very rigid, very stiff and rigid. I said, if he falls over, Ed, catch him. He said, are you kidding? Of course I will. He didn't even know that. And as I count, slowly Johnny starts tilting and swaying. Lift him up, stretch him between 2 chairs, put his head on one, his feet in the other. There was nothing in the middle of him. I asked Bette Midler to come over. She wouldn't come over. I said, Bette Midler, come over. She wouldn't come over. And we finally got her to sit in the middle of him. And that picture got in the centerfold of Parade magazine all over the world. She sat in the middle. There was no illusion. And there was no trickery. And I'll tell you the story when we come back, the background of that story, but Carson couldn't believe it.
Wow. Well, we're going to be back. We have to take a public service. I hate to leave. We have to take a public service
I'm going to stay here because I'm eager to follow up that.
You're not going to get 2 chairs and stretch me across. I'm safe? Okay.
I changed my mind.
Okay, good. We're going to be right back after this public service announcement. Don't touch that dial.
It's an onion.
We are back with the Amazing Kreskin. We have an amazing show because you're on the show. A legend in the business. It's wonderful to have you on. Now, you wanted to continue on with what we left off.
I never was going to be called Amazing. I never intended to. It was
How did that happen?
Kreskin. Well, I was coming on airline show, getting on airlines, and people would be coming off, or I was leaving the airline, people that are coming on to replace us would say, "Hi, Amazing," and I thought, "Gee, that's nice." Hi, I said to my road manager, "Isn't that nice they're saying that?" And then I find out why. Carson had a routine because of my travels and so forth. I didn't get to often watch late night television, and someone said, "Well, you got to watch the show, Carson. You're on next Monday or what have you." And Carson's routine was, Kreskin was on 3 weeks ago. Yeah, he was on, and he was only 90% amazing. And I said, no, Johnny was 92% amazing. And Carson's, I get the feeling it was 9, and they made a routine about it. And here, as a result of that became my signature because everybody started calling me amazing around the world.
Wow.
So anyway, so when Carson did this test with me, which NBC didn't want me to do, they were afraid of his well-being. As we're talking about, I'm going to do something with him, there were two people sitting next to the producer of Carson's show at the end where all the guests are sitting, but they were beyond that, sitting off camera. And Carson was nudging and nodding there and nudging, and I figured out that they must have been the two NBC officials of the show that were there to watch me. He was getting quiet satisfaction, so I went through this when it was, and when it was all over, and she sat on me, and everything was over with, he said, "Kreskin, I am glad we did this." And when my first show with the Jimmy Fallon show, when he took over the Tonight Show, when I got to the studio, NBC, downstairs on Broadway, where these two men were producers of the show, I said, "Gee, it's nice you met me, but Jimmy would like you to see the studio because he knew that's where you did the Carson show." After that, Carson moved to L.A., and I was always flown out to L.A. So I'm walking in the studio, and I started breaking down and started tearing, and I said, yes, this was the early days of Johnny, and I can tell you things I did. This is where they said, "Can you really describe things, what we did?" Mm-hmm. So I do the Jimmy Fallon show, and it turns out Fallon was a revered fan of Carson. And we're off the air, and I said, I did something with Johnny, which NBC banned me from doing, and of course Fallon's doing the Tonight Show for me. And I did it there, and Fallon said, "The next time you're on, we're going to do it."
Wow.
So I come on the show, and I'm standing with Fallon, and the crew didn't know what I was going to do, and his eyes close, and he starts falling. We pick him up, we put chairs there, and the crew, the musicians are there holding the chairs. I said, "Wait a minute." I had someone sitting on the middle of Carson. You got the chairs in place, you got them braced, and Fallon's lying, and bring a chair over for me. I got to climbed on the chair and went and stepped on Jimmy Fallon and stood on the middle of him. And the place went into pandemonium. It was fun. I got off. So it had a background story to follow.
Wow. Let's go way back. We're going to go way back.
I hope I have a memory for that,
Okay, I hope so. At what age did you first realize you had special powers? How did that come about?
Well, the gifts, it came about when I was 9 years old. I knew when I was a kid, when I loved to read comic books. I wasn't able to read, but my mother would read me comic books, and I have about 200 of the classic comics, original copies of the originals that were never sold, so
wow.
They're valuable and what have you. And someone in my relatives in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania, there on the Polish side of my family, gave me a comic, and intrigued me. It was called Mandrake the Magician. And Mandrake was one of the most popular. It was in all the newspapers through the Second World War in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and just until, I guess, just before the end of before they came to the new century. But it was also a comic book, and he was not a magician. He had hypnotic powers. He read people's thoughts, and he would solve crimes. He wore a red cape, and he had a black man that was a Lothar. We loved the man, and so there were a lot of movies done about him, and I wanted to be like him. So when I played games, I didn't play Superman or a detective Nick Carter. I played Mandrake, and we played games without equipment because we were using our imagination when we played cops and robbers. And then something happened in the third grade when I was 9 years old. It was raining outside, and Miss Curtis said, "We're not going to go out and play because it's raining. I'm going to teach you a game. Jane Hamilton, go in the hallway." I just had dinner with her about a year ago, and we hadn't seen each other for years and years. So anyway, Jane's out there. "Well, hide this beanbag, put it somewhere." We put it in someone's desk. So 30 of us are sitting there, and she comes back in, and Miss Curtis says, Jane, you're going to walk around. If you're getting near where we hit it, they'll say you're getting warm. If you're not near, you're cold. If you're very close, game of hot and cold. She walked around, and she finally got near the desk. We're saying, hot, hot. And she reached in the desk and found it. And I'm walking home from school. I was so upset that I wasn't picked to play it. I got to my brother. He was home ahead of time. My mother is shopping. And I said, Joe, let's walk over Grandma and Grandpa's house. They were from Sicily. My grandfather built this house in coal with his own hands. Still there, a two-story house. I said, they rented the downstairs to make ends meet. I said, Joey, go upstairs and hide this nickel or penny. Upstairs anywhere, Grandpa's house. I'm standing outdoors. He calls me, and I run up the steps. I was 9 years old. I walk in the kitchen. My grandmother did not speak English. Oh, I loved her dearly. She'd been a chef for royalty in Sicily, and she knew what was going on. And I walk through this large kitchen with the potbelly stoves, and I walk into my uncle's bedroom. He was at work, and I climb up on this maroon chair because I was only 9 years old, and I find myself reaching behind a curtain rod, and I suddenly felt the coin. I pulled it down, and my brother was in the kitchen. I walked in the kitchen. My brother said, and I suddenly said, I forgot to tell you to talk to me. He never said you're getting warm. He never said you're getting cold. He didn't know what I was going to do. And somehow I found the coin. I think my grandmother thought because she was Italian that I had the evil eye. And I started doing this in private affairs when my which was a large family, got together, and then doing private shows and so forth. And by the time I was 11 or 12, I was doing, in sixth grade, my teacher set an hour, 45 minutes aside every week for me to perform with my classmates in sixth grade. I can remember one day I said, well, all of you think of a movie, and I pointed to Gloria, who sat next to James Hamilton. I said, you think of a movie that you just didn't see? It was in the past. She says, no, it was around Christmas time, and I named the movie. And slowly, and that's how my career, and by the way, the search for that coin has become a signature in my career all over the world.
With your paycheck, right?
In all my shows, I hand my check. Now, if it's not at Carnegie Hall, I handed my check over to a committee of strangers from the audience. They took me to the lobby, and Carnegie Hall is 4 stories high, and I walk in the theater. Someone on the committee has to concentrate on where it's hidden. I asked no questions, and I kept going to this window here and didn't want to open it. And I kept coming back in the orchestra, and finally an usher said, Kreskin, whatever you need to do, if it's wrong, if it's not illegal, we'll stop you, because it turns out it was for an emergency fire. So I opened the door, and I reached in, and it was the hose, which you never touch. I pulled 8 feet of hose out of the door, and there was my check at the end.
Wow.
So the most dramatic case was at a university where universities go crazy with the test. And it was an audience of 3,000, not in the theater, but they had to have a larger group because it was family weekend. So they had a gymnasium, it was about 3,000 students. And I walk in, and I'm tripping over people who are sitting on the tarp floor because they had given a place for people to sit, and they were in the bleachers. I come up to this elderly gentleman, I must have been a father, and I said, could you stand? Would you open your mouth? And I felt like a fool. I said, I'm sorry, sir, please sit down. And there was no check there. And I walked away from him towards the stage, which was a metal platform they had built. Got someone else on the committee to think. I said, you must think of every step in your mind that I need to take. And I walked through and froze and turned around, and there was that gentleman. I said, sir, if I err in here and I've lost my check, would you open your mouth? I said, does this have to do with the roof of your mouth? I will never forget this as long as I live. I wish there had been a camera. He reached in his mouth, took out his upper plates, and handed me my check.
Wow.
So I have failed 11 times. The most famous failure was New Zealand, of which I loved to tour, but it was my second day at this beautiful theater. I was there for a week or two, and I failed, and they wanted a press conference because they had seen me on television from the States. Through the years, they said, Kreskin, The next day, the press conference was in the morning outside, and instead of the press that was there were over 100 reporters because the word got around everywhere, and they wanted to ask me about the check test. Not because I simply failed, but the night before when I failed, I lost, and when the money is lost, it's given back to the people who booked me. I lost in one night $51,000.
Wow.
I was told to turn over to Crippled Children's Hospital.
I'm not going to get the bill, am I?
Part of it was turned over to Crippled Children's Hospital, and they named a wing after me.
How nice.
So that's part of the features of crazy stories I could tell you,
I
and
bet.
close calls, because it's been nerve-wracking at times when I've almost given, especially when you're in a stadium where, some stadiums are 100,000 people, so they have a truck usually off the stage, and when I go in there, the police go in with me, and then some of the witnesses, because all the windows are painted, prepared up. And when you come out, I am now understanding that they hit it anywhere amongst 100,000 people. So it's a dramatic test.
Boy, boy. You know, we have only about 2 minutes and 30
And that's
seconds.
it?
But we have to go. I can't believe it. But
I got it. I'm sorry.
I have to ask you
talked
this
too
question,
much.
because if I don't, I'm going to get any predictions for 2020?
Well, my predictions are a much greater concern. It's not dealing with the election, because I'm going to do that. I never announce the elections ahead of time. I seal them away, and we're going to play it to three sources. But my great concern is that we're going to need to save our culture, because it isn't that we're not just having humor. People are not socializing as much as they did. When you go into a store now and watch university students and high school students, they're sitting with cell phones, and we are losing our gift of hearing what people say. And one of the greatest secrets of my life, one of the greatest secrets I have, is empathy, the ability to feel the way someone else feels. And the only way you can do this is if you listen and feel and reflect upon what you heard. Not just used to finding a quick answer and then turning a machine off. And you can see people now in eating places, 4 of them sitting around a table with a cell phone against your ear. Get that damn thing put away.
I know.
I've been told people who have you tell me someone, and remember this remark, who says they have 200 friends on the internet. I will point out to you a very, very lonely person.
That's so true. And everybody emails, and there's no communication. There's no eyeball-to-eyeball communication.
And it's better it's better you tell dirty jokes, crazy stories, things that are crazy, because you learn to have a feeling for other people, and you can't buy that in a machine.
True.
Oh my God, I could talk to you for hours.
Oh, we could do a couple of nights.
By the way,
here, right?
folks, this better not be a race. I dare not. Well, believe it. I dare
Oh,
not.
I'm in trouble.
I dare not read his thoughts in public. I say that to all the people I work with. Great to work with.
How
you.
about the famous
You
handshake?
You got to get used to the
All
handshake.
right.
And you know, in the great Buck Howard, John Malkovich rehearsed that, and Tom Hanks said to me, he was driving for 2 hours. We were doing it with everybody, and we needed a chiropractor.
I don't need a chiropractor now. I have the Amazing Kreskin. Thank you so much. It's very rare we get a legend on the show, and I want to thank you for
I want to
coming.
tell you, I won't say goodbye to you. Let's just say in the spirit of broadcasting, to be continued.
Absolutely. This is Mike Sobel saying good night to you, and especially to you.